we were always struggling with the city. So to give a simple example, any metro cities, uh, you will see that there are people who have access to certain kind of facilities, services, access to certain kind of ways of living, and some people don't have. And what it does is that it creates a enormous gap between in the city that is completely visible in terms of the way the city has grown, and therefore we see a large section of population in places like Bombay, which is living in slum or in a very tight housing situation, unlike some other parts. So in a way that we are a little bit aware about the difficulties that we have been facing as far as city planning is concerned. That has led to all of these. It's not that it's right now. We'll not get into that, but one of the impact which suddenly one sees with with the COVID is the beginning point of people on the edges, and especially people who are related to gig economy or people who are migrants. And if you look at it, that's where you start suddenly seeing city being exposed. And that is the point from where the question starts emerging, is that if if there are significant amount of people who have invested in the making of the city, then at one point of time with these kind of pandemic, you find that suddenly city is unable to take care of them, uh, and especially in terms of the way in which city is governed, or city has institutions which we find are sort of completely unable to address these issues. So, so it exposes at one point of time the human aspect of the city, and I think that fundamentally is what is really leading us to deeply think about the way the city has grown, the way there is a relationship between people to people, relationship between people to institutions, and relationship between people to governance in terms of policies. Uh, and fundamentally, instead of looking at city as a physical construct, maybe we should start looking at city from the point of view of these relationships. And I would add one other relationship to this, which would be the question of nature in the city. Now, if you look at the way this situation has emerged, it is very clear that there is a large amount of people who have come together to support as far as possible. So we see an institutions, an organic institution of people suddenly coming up and doing whatever they can within their capacity. We also see at the same time our inability in terms of our institutional capacity to support and to imagine the challenges that are emerging out of this certain kind of decisions and certain events that are shaping place in the city. If you see that the only agencies which are working are the people to people relationship. So now if we start looking at that point from that point of view, and instead of saying that cities are in reality, yes, a set of relationships, to sort of accept that the fact, but what are those set of relationships? So I think that the set of, because the cities are actually made for people, made by people, the relationship, the beginning point of relationship has to be people. The institutions are created by the people for the people, and therefore these institutions are also another set of relationships. Now what happens is that cities are laid physically, and therefore on a landscape, and therefore there is a physical relationship of the city. Now the question is that post COVID, or the moment you start looking at it, will there be a change in the physical planning of the city? Okay, and I think that's slightly it's a very difficult question to sort of dwell into it, because at one point of time we as a human being are used to living in proximity. At another point of time, we also know the reality of the fact that this is one pandemic, there could be many more pandemics. The other reality is also of the fact that we need healthy air, we need good infrastructures, and all of those. So each of these factors are trying to play around with each other. And so we do not have luxury to say that we will have a spaced house. So which means that we'll have one apartment, and then after 30 meters we'll have next apartment. Is not a luxury with which we can work. So which means that our investment has to be actually in building type to begin with, because if we look at city, then the cities are made out of buildings. And for the time being, I want to suspend this idea of architecture as a discipline, because if we suspend this idea of architecture as discipline, to a large extent we suspend this idea of historical baggage which architecture carries. And let's look at by saying that architecture, for the time being, not architecture but buildings, and we look at buildings that are built. And why I want to look at buildings as a build, because for example, artisans who built are no history. They are they are carrying the knowledge from the past, and whatever they are doing is in the present. And if we look at from and if we really suspend that discussion and look at, then we have to look at carefully the building type now, because we are used to certain types of building in the way in which we have been living, and suddenly we have been forced to say that, okay, we will have to also work from home. There are companies who are thinking that in next 5 years, lot of work will be which will be from work from home. So suddenly at the same time you're also finding that there is a scarcity of food in terms of vegetables because of pandemic, because of all of this, which means that now the question about city from the point of view, if we look at the idea of country as nature, or country which produces agriculture or which has agriculture, and city as services, then suddenly you find that these are problematic polarities which we have created, because we suddenly have to question this idea that city needs to be, the building needs to be worked out in a certain way, that it has got certain degree of autonomy within the house in the way in which it is trying to service, and also the way in which it is trying to consume. So that is one level of change which I think that will happen at a level of unit. Then at a level of unit, it will also start happening as to now, when you look at an apartment block, as a typical example, in the way we always look at from the point of view of investors. Now I think that investment and living is a problem, because sometimes this investment always gets into profit making, and it doesn't get into way people live. The result is that we have tried and so much narrowed down the idea of living, that we have a service code, and then we have got these corridors, and we have got these apartments which are there. Now if you look at from the point of view of health, then the sequencing of the way we enter the house will have to change, because now when you get into a house, you will have to look at how you will sanitize it. So you will change your clothes, you'll clean your hands, you'll clean your face. Then you get into it, because there's a family which is there, there are people which are there, which means that the first change already starts happening within the house, is about the sequence of entering into the house. The other kind of change will happen is let's say about work from home, because if the kids are going to, let's say the school decides that it would stagger, only once a week student has to come to sort of discuss certain specific things, etc., and then rest of the thing it would be online teaching, which means now house suddenly becomes a place where every family members are working in the same small space, which means that the design of house will have to change. Now, then we will have to go back to the street, and we'll have to discuss the question about what is the relationship of house to the street. And when we start looking at it, then we will have to lay down our street in a manner in which the physical distancing is possible. We'll have to lay down dedicated corridors in the manner in which our elderly and our kids have a dedicated movement corridor. We'll have to do certain things, because the risks are so high that there is no joke here. We can't say that we are going to, I mean, if this continues, we are going to lose a certain kind of population, and all of us will be in some phase going there. So therefore mobility will change, which means that we'll have to also look at that the work home relationship either will have to be virtual or will not have to be of that much. Then the relationship of the workplace will also change. To speculate, that would be that maybe if we bring the idea of welfare state, then what was happening is that the workers were staying in the campus and all of those facilities were there earlier. Now imagine an apartment block or five apartment blocks where one of them are, the high end workers, then a little bit different economic sections, etc. But all of this within the same precinct where there are staggered way in which they can come and leave, or and which they can work and deal. So there are many levels of changes which are possible in terms of the way we construct these relationships. And I think that we need to look at it little more seriously, and because unless until we don't look at all of these, um, I think that we would not be able to do service, including the apartment blocks which are already existing, including the plannings which we have already done. How do we retrofit all of these? Are the set of emerging questions and speculations which I am sort of thinking about.